Hi, get ready to make now Ciao Francesca. This is a fantastic long unlined coat pattern. It's got a dropped 3/4 sleeve, an open front design with no collar and patch pockets. This is great for all genders, young and old, and can be easily modified. With an overlocking machine, overlock all the edges of the pocket pieces. This provides a professional, durable and clean finish that completely encloses the raw edge. If you have a normal sewing machine, use a zigzag stitch along all the edges of the pockets. This is a good alternative that secures the raw edges and prevents fraying. Position the magnet sewing guide at 1 centimetre to ensure consistent seam allowance. Fold down the top part of the pocket, aligning the fold precisely at the level of the notches. Ensure the front, the right side of the fabric, is on the inside during this fold. This creates a clean finished edge when turned. Sew down the 2 sides of this folded over section. This secures the folded fabric and creates the pocket opening edge. Turn the pocket right side out. The seam you just sewed will now be hidden inside and the top edge will be neat and finished. Turn over all the remaining raw edges of the pocket, the sides and the bottom, by 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. Press the entire pocket thoroughly with your steam iron to set these folds and maintain a crisp shape. Once we finish pressing, we have a neat pocket ready to sew across the top edge of the pocket opening. Stitch along the hem of the pocket opening. This is the part we've folded over already and we've sewn down the sides, so the top edge of the pocket. This secures the folded down fabric inside the top edge and provides a neat finished look. Pin the prepared pocket onto the front of the jacket piece. That's the right side, using the pattern markings to ensure it's in the correct position. Stitch the pocket to the jacket front piece along the 2 side edges and the bottom edge of the pocket. Use a back stitch at the beginning and end of the stitching line, specifically where the stitching meets the pocket opening. This reinforces the pocket at the stress points and prevents the stitching from coming loose with use. We've used a slightly lighter thread to sew our garment so that you can see better the stitching lines and also to give a slight contrast and detail to the jacket. Now pin the 2 front parts of the collar together, right sides facing. We'll then stitch the pinned edge with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then press the seam allowances flat on the back by using your thumb and flatten the seam well. This is a crucial step for reducing bulk and ensuring the collar rolls nicely. Now we're going to pin together the shoulder seams of the front and back jacket pieces. Make sure the edges are perfectly aligned. Ensure the middle part of the collar, the section you've just constructed, reaches the designated notch on the jacket neckline. Now we're going to sew along the area we've just pinned with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do this slowly, making sure that the 2 front parts of the collar that we previously sewed together, that seam is flat and open. And then when we get to the point where there's a curve, we have to follow round on that point and always finish and start with a back stitch to secure the stitching. Now we're going to overlock the shoulders with our overlocking machine. Do not overlock the raw edge of the neckline. This is where the collar will be attached. So only the 2 shoulders with the overlocking machine, or if you don't have an overlocking machine, with a zigzag stitch. Now we're going to press this area. So we're pressing the area of the shoulders, the seams that we've just overlocked. We press those towards the back of the jacket. Whereas the neckline that we haven't overlocked, we're going to press that one towards the collar, so in the opposite direction. Now we're going to overlock both sides of the jacket pieces, the edges that will form the side seams. When overlocking, always do this with the right side of the fabric showing. That means the right side facing upwards. If you don't have an overlocking machine, you can always still use a zigzag stitch. We're now working with a linen, so we're using an overlocking machine. But if you were to make this jacket in either the sleeveless version or the long sleeve version or the 3/4 sleeve version in a boiled wool, then due to the nature of that particular fabric, no overlocking would be required. Now we're going to overlock all around the open part of the sleeves. So we have the 2 sleeve pieces and we overlock all around the edges. Where the notch is on the reverse side, we're going to fold the hem of the sleeve and press down all along to the end of the sleeve where there's the other notch. If you need help with a ruler, then you can use a ruler to make sure that the levels are the same. Now we're going to attach the sleeve to the side of the jacket. So line the sleeve piece with the notch at the shoulder and the other notch down the side of the jacket. Once these have been lined up, you can then pin the sleeve to the jacket. We're going to sew with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along the area that we've just pinned. Now we need to press the stitched seam of the sleeve opening. So we're going to press all along the area that we've just sewed, opening the seam so that it lies nice and flat. Now we're going to pin the side seams of the jacket together, continuing down the underarm of the sleeve. Make sure the sleeve seams are in line and match all the various notches down to the bottom hemline. Sew the pin side and underarm seams with a 1 centimetre allowance or 3/8 of an inch. Now we're going to press the stitched side seams of the jacket. For the arms, we're going to use an arm piece of the ironing board or a sleeve roll to press the underarm seams of the sleeve. Using this particular tool prevents the pressing creases into the rest of the sleeve fabric. Now we're going to pin together the 2 ends of the neck facing. Again, using a 1 centimetre seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch, we're going to then sew down the pinned area. Now we overlock the internal part of the facing only. Always overlock with the right side of the fabric showing. If you want, you could also attach a trim to the finished internal edge of the facing. This adds a lovely decorative finish to the inside of the jacket. Now we're going to pin the assembled facing piece to the jacket front and neckline. Ensure that all the notches and seams are aligned perfectly. The right sides of the jacket and facing should be together. Once you've pinned this area, sew the facing to the jacket using a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to start by securing the end of the facing to the jacket. So we're going to start at the bottom of the jacket and we're going to stitch along this edge. Always using 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from the edge, stitching. And then we continue stitching around the rest of the jacket, the front line of the jacket and around the neckline with the same seam allowance. Now we're going to overlock the bottom part of the jacket. That means the front of the jacket is facing upwards and we're going to overlock the bottom edge, making sure that the seams that we've sewn, the side seams, are open and lying flat while we sew this area. Now we're going to turn the angles of the bottom of the facing right side out. You can use an awl or a point turner here to make sure that the corners are neat and sharp. Now press the newly attached and turned facing. Pressing sets the seams and ensures the facing lies flat against the front. This secures the raw edge before the final hem is turned up. Now we're going to press the bottom hem of the jacket and we're going to use a ruler again here to ensure that the hem allowance is even all along the bottom edge of the jacket. If you want, you can also pin the pressed hem fold in place and this will help you when you do the final stitching of our hemline. So now we are securing the facing to the body of the jacket by pinning along the edge of the facing. So we're almost done and I'm sure you'll find that this has been a great project. Also very versatile, depending on the fabrics you used, whether you've decided to make it sleeveless and wear it as a gilet, whether you've made it with the long sleeves and the long version, or the long sleeves and the shorter knee length version, or whether you've made it with the 3/4 sleeves. It's really a lovely piece to wear all year round. Now we're stitching the facing. We're sewing along the edge where we previously overlocked the raw edge. This secures the facing flap to the jacket interior fabric. And if you follow along the line where you've overlocked, you're going to get a nice straight edge on the front for your sewing. Now we're going to sew along the folded sleeve edge that you previously pressed and pinned into place. Follow the line of the overlock stitching, as that will give you a nice straight line on the front. And once we've finished hemming both of the sleeves, we're then going to look at the bottom of the jacket. Now here we start where the facing finishes. So we start from that point and then where the facing joins the main jacket body. And then we're going to sew along the line of the hem, the folded edge that you've already previously pinned. So having finished the hem of the jacket now and pressed the jacket, it's finished, but we wanted to add a belt to it. So we've decided to cut a strip of fabric. Here again, the length is up to you and the height again is up to you. So we've cut 2 strips of fabric, and now we're going to sew these 2 together, and using a standard seam allowance of 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. Once we've sewn them together, we're going to open and flatten the stitching. Then we're going to fold the fabric in half lengthways. Ensure that the right sides of the fabric are on the inside, so right sides together. And then we're going to sew along the whole length of this fabric, of this belt, using a standard seam allowance. When you're sewing along the edge of the belt, remember to leave in the middle a section of around 3 centimetres long, and that's where you're going to turn the belt to the right side once you finish sewing around all the edges. Using a knitting needle or a loop turner, we're going to carefully push the fabric through the gap. Now we press the finished belt thoroughly. This sets the seams and flattens the belt. Close the small gap that was left open. This can be done with a hand stitch, slip stitch for invisibility, or with the sewing machine top stitch across the gap. So here we've shown you right up to the part of making the Ciao Francesca with a belt, so the belted version. There's so many other more options that you can also do. So as I say, in the pattern, you've got the possibility to do the 2 sleeve lengths. There's also the possibility to shorten it. And there again, you've got it shows you in the pattern where you should shorten it and by how many centimetres. And it's so versatile, the Ciao Francesca. You can wear it in the winter and you can make it up in, say, a wool or a boucle or a boiled wool, and that makes it even easier and quicker to make up. You can make it in a beautiful linen or light cottons, or you could make something elegant and luxurious in a silk. So there's lots of ways you can play around with the fabric choice in Ciao Francesca. Again, there's also the possibility of doing the sleeveless version. Here, we've just not added on the sleeves, and you'll just pin and press around the armhole with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So have fun and look forward to anyone sending us your makes.